opened up to her more than he did to anybody else in the family when she took on the project of doing his story of how he escaped. Up until then, he didn't speak much of it. He didn't talk too much about it. I do know some. He grew up in Syria, in Aleppo, Syria. He was one of 12, and there were more. There were, I think, 3 more brothers and a sister that my grandfather had by his first wife. So they were a huge family. Most of them got out of Syria. Everybody but one left. My oldest aunt, she stayed. She refused to leave. She didn't want to leave home. And
what happened to her?
She passed away in Aleppo.
Did she have children as well?
No, she didn't have any children. And
I'm sort of just curious if that meant, you know.
There's nobody left.
Wow, but quite a story.
Yeah, they all slowly escaped or left somehow, found a way to get out. My father was the last one. He stayed with my grandmother until it got so bad in I believe it was 1950 when he finally decided it was time to go. Everything was fine. They were happy. Everybody was happy living in Syria. It wasn't until Israel became a state that everything fell apart. It was funny because the Jews, the Arabs, the Muslims, everybody lived happily. And the minute Israel became a state, everybody turned on each other. And the rioting started. They started killing the Jews in the streets. My father was, I'm sure Michelle will tell you, my father was in prison quite a bit just for being Jewish. They'd pick him off the street. And the man that would take him away happened to be his best friend, who was Muslim. He was ordered to start killing and rioting and stuff. And he would take my dad away to prison. My dad would go every week. He was taken in for a few days. They always made up an excuse. It was they called him a spy. They would read his mail, and if they saw something in a letter that he was mailing that they thought was suspicious, even though it wasn't, it could have been just saying, "Hi, how are you?" They put him in jail. So he got out. He got out in 1950 and went to Beirut, where things were much better. A lot of the Jews from Syria escaped either into Israel or into Beirut. Life was great for a while until the 70s, and then again, we can't go home. But like I said, Michelle knows way more than I do. He opened up to her, and unbelievably, he even sang songs to her. He used to sing in Syria. It was beautiful the way he opened up to her.
Wow. Well, you know what? All right. So why don't we come back to you then, Gracie? We'll certainly ask you more questions. But Michelle, let's pivot to you. Tell us a little bit about, again, sort of the Coles Notes version, so to speak, of of your grandfather's story. You're muted, eh? All right, try that.
There we go. We were having, of course, all day, the internet connection was perfect. And just now, my Wi-Fi went kaput, so I'm calling you on my phone on my data. So, Dad, when you see the bill, sorry, I guess happy Hanukkah to me. Hi. All right. So I got back at the tail end of what my mother was saying, but I'm sure she explained a lot about my father's journey. He did open up to me quite a bit. It was eye-opening for, I guess, my mother, as she said, because she didn't know even the smallest things about him growing up, that he wanted to be a singer. So like these little things and the big things that he told me. Making the film itself, I started in high school. I did it as a project. It was a chat for Dr. Chaim Kaduri's class. So I need to say a shout out and a thank you to him if he's listening, because I know that without him, this never would have gotten made. He's been a big supporter through all the years that I started it in. Was it 2011? I don't even know, 2007. I'm older than that, sorry. So I don't even know, it's still March. In my mind, it's still March, so I don't know where I am. But I started it there, and it was really just a way to get a grade, and I never even completed it. And then I ended up going to Israel, and I met my grandfather's family. I ended up staying with them. And after talking to them and sharing the information that I knew and hearing what they knew, I saw that, you know what, there really is a story there. And a story that nobody was talking about at the time. We see so many Zooms and just even events way back when we did live events. There were so many things going on that dealt with the Sephardic Jewry. And back then, when I started it, I can tell you there was nothing, because I would even go on Google. I couldn't find information. It was so hard to find information about Jews from Sephardic lands. So that in itself was a challenge, that at that time, to get that type of information and to get other people to help, it was really hard to find those people. Luckily, I did have my grandfather, but he was one of the last left in his family, along with his sister Linda, who's in it as well. But together we were able to put together this movie that I'm very proud to say is still making the rounds today. And I still receive messages from all over the world. Last week, I got a message, someone in England found the movie, and they were touched by it, and they said that they wanted to find out their own family history, and I'm guiding them. I'm helping them figure out where they came from. So it's been a fun, crazy journey that we're still on, which is mind blowing to me.
So your mom, when you were sort of in Zoom purgatory for a couple minutes, your mom was telling us a little bit about your grandfather's sort of childhood, and he grew up, and that sort of, I don't know if Gracie obviously jump in, but that she didn't describe necessarily an idyllic upbringing, but sort of a normal, relatively safe, comfortable upbringing. And then after the creation or the rebirth of the state of Israel, a lot more antagonism towards Jews, and certainly in Syria and in Iran. We've seen this in other countries as well. But sort of tell us. And then she was saying that his best friend was the one who was tasked with sort of imprisoning him and arresting him. Tell us a little bit about when things started to change for your grandfather in Syria.
So sorry, I didn't catch the end of your message, your question.
I was going to say, tell us about when things started to change in Syria for your grandfather. Like how did life change for him?
I mean, I think the thing that he always, that's a great question. The thing that he always said to me, really related to me, was I think just his everyday life, his outlook on things. I think things were never perfect, but I think he didn't walk down the street before everything started thinking I'm in danger. They went about, I mean, you could even liken it, I guess, to right now. You know that there's anti-Semitism out there, but you still do what you do. You go on with your life and you live your life. And I think that's how he was. And then when everything turned, it was just walking out the front door. That was a big thing, because you don't know what was going to happen. You don't know what was waiting for you. One of the stories he always told me, which was in the film, was one day, I think this is the first time that he was arrested, or not arrested, beaten up. This is not the first time he was arrested. He was closing up his shop. He owned a women's lingerie store, and he sold perfumes and things like makeup, things like that. And he was locking up, and he was walking down the street, and some men, policemen, came up, and they clubbed him over the head, and they said, you want a country? You think you deserve, this is of course when Israel was becoming a state, you think you want a country? And then they just started beating him, and he went home bloodied and bruised. And then after that, it was actually his best friend they were putting him in jail. I mean, his best friend's father was the chief of police in Syria. He was not Jewish. And I think that's the reason why they let him go at the end of every day, but they still had to arrest him. I believe it was that guy who even told him, I'm sorry, but I have no choice. I have to do this. And they were best friends. So.
Wow. Now,
A lot of his friends were killed. A lot of his friends were killed, were beaten up, murdered. Some of them disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to them.
Right.
During that time, it was chaos.
So tell me about, sort of when did things start to change? Was it sort of one day did the, President Assad, the previous Assad, sort of make an announcement? Like what was it overnight, or was it sort of more things started to change? Like we saw in Nazi Germany, we had Nuremberg laws, and you saw sort of, increasing propaganda, or was this like the light turned on one day? Like how quickly was the transition from normal, quote unquote, normal to, precarious situation?
Well, the way he described it to me, there were times where they didn't get along and there was anti-Semitism. And I believe and the way he said was leading up to it, there was a lot of tension and things on the rise. But it was almost like, I mean, this is the way they remember it, right? And a great example is my great aunt Linda, his younger sister, who was much younger than him at the time. And the way she remembers it in the film is almost like a snap of your fingers, everything changed. And she was sent off. She was sent away. She went through Turkey, I believe, and then she went to Lebanon. But she describes it as, one day, everything, I guess, when Israel became a state, everything just kind of went haywire. They burned things. They burned the synagogue. They burned the Torah. She said it was daytime and the sky went black. It went to night. And then she said a couple days later, they sent her to Lebanon. Like it was that fast. So it might have been something where, I don't know. I guess it depends on people. Some people left earlier. Some people left a little later and waited. My grandfather, he was the last to go in his family. So I mean, he wanted to get everybody out first and he saw everyone go, including his mother, and then he went, but it just got progressively worse. But I think it was almost like for some people overnight, like, and then they just kind of got scared and left.
So what was the point when he sort of realized, or his family realized, that it was time to go and it spurred the exodus? Tell us about that.
I know that it was definitely around the time that he was being thrown in jail. I know that he described again in the film about coming home and his mom just seeing him black and blue and there was blood coming out of his head, and I think it was scary. And you have to remember as well, it was the situation. See, the way my grandfather grew up, one of like 12 and he was one of the youngest though. So all of his older brothers they were married, they had left other countries. They went to Japan, they went to Ghana, they went all over. They were scattered and they all had families of their own. And he was one of the, I believe he was the oldest there at the time, maybe. And his father had passed away. There was nobody to look after, all those people younger than him and his mother. So I think it was a pretty easy decision at that point, just if you can pick up and go. And they did have that outside help and influence. You had people in other countries who I'm sure were, sending money and helping them, but it's still a struggle. Like you hear with anybody, they don't want to leave. Nobody really wants to leave. Even when the worst happens, you don't want to believe that you have to leave, if that makes sense.
Sure. So what was no, I mean, I can understand sort of the difficulties. Family's been there for generations, hundreds of years, and you sort of have to make that decision. So what was the process in leaving? Again, this is open to sort of either Gracie or Michelle. I'm sort of curious because you can perhaps fill in, any gaps that either might have, but sort of what's the story of how he got out then?
I can say it or my mom can say it, whatever.
Michelle, you do it.
Okay. So the story is he got everybody got out one by one. And his mother, as I said, was the last to go. And then they paid someone. He was an Arab, a Syrian. They were paying them, non-Jews. And there were some who you could bribe to be smuggled out. So the story, the way he tells it, was every day, because now remember, he has a record. So there's a record of him being in jail, and there's a record of him signing a book every day. You have to say that you're there, and you kind of had to go back and sign again. And you needed permission to cross certain, we'll say, town lines, right? So he said that he's going he went to I think it was like a post office where they did it. He went there and he explained to them, I need to go to this area because I'm going to the Aklil, which is a wedding. And they said, okay. And he signed it and he went and he met a guy at the train station, and there's somebody going around whispering at people like, Joseph, Joseph, looking. And
This is in Aleppo?
This is in Syria. This is
In
how he got
Aleppo,
out.
Syria?
Yeah.
No, but what city is this, Aleppo?
This
He
is
got-
in Aleppo.
Yeah, Aleppo. Yeah. So he
sorry.
went, yeah. So he got on this train with this guy, and they took him to the middle of nowhere, and he got in a car, and they had some guns and a dog, and they gave him a fake passport, and they told him, like, learn what's on your passport, learn who your mother is, who your father is, where you're born, your address, everything. The passport said that he was born in Philadelphia for some reason. So he didn't even speak English, and he's born in Philadelphia. But he got to the border, and again, the border guard was paid as well. They knew. So they got there. They all kind of said what they had to say, nodded at each other. And this is very scary because everybody's got guns. And you don't know who you can trust. And then he said he just kind of sat there waiting, as hard as it was, and they drove across the border. He got into Lebanon, and he said the moment they got across, he got out of the car and he just started kissing the floor. And he was just like, he said, like, all this weight came off his shoulders. Like, thank God, it's, at least in his mind, he said it's over. Because Lebanon was safe at that time.
And so how much money are we talking about? Like, was this a significant amount of money that he had to pull together for this fake passport? Or was this something that he had to sell his possessions? Like, how did you would think that getting a fake passport and paying these guys off would be a significant expense unless you were quite wealthy. Is that?
Well, his family had money. They left it all there. His family had money. They were, I mean, it depends which sibling you ask. Some say they were really wealthy. Some say, I don't remember that wealth, but the way it was explained to us, I mean, he also had his own store. So he had money. He did very well at that store. And his father was a textile merchant. Before that, he had a big house, which of course he left behind. So you sell what you have to, and he left everything else, and then the Arabs just took it, right? But they did have some money in the bank. He did have, I mean, but then again, you had to pay for all of them to get out. So there was some, you have to sell what you get, and you know what I mean? It's like any story you hear, it's the same thing. You do what you have to do.
Wow. And so how long was your grandfather in Lebanon?
Well, he was in Lebanon from then in 1950 until they came to Toronto with my mother. So actually, my mom can tell you about Lebanon because I know she has like one or two very small memories. But
so Gracie is thank you for that, Michelle. It's fascinating. Gracie, you were, according to the 5 years old when you came to Canada. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was 5. We left in 1966.
Okay.
And
so tell us what.
Life was great. Life was great there. My parents were very happy. There's a huge Lebanese Jewish community there. Everybody was living okay until things went bad again. But we left in 1966 because I had an uncle that had come here to Canada, and he kept writing my dad, you should come here, life will be better, for the kids, for your family. So my dad up and decided Canada, where the rest of them, most of them went to Israel. I don't know why he picked Canada. Anyway, he picked Canada, so we came here, right? And they didn't like the cold. I mean, Beirut was gorgeous. You could go skiing and go to the beach in one day because there was snow on the mountains and gorgeous beaches. Like, life was amazing there. It was so beautiful. Anyway, I don't think it is, I'm not sure anymore. My parents left and never went back. We used to talk about going back, but I don't think, my dad was never able to go back because he was like the film is called Wanted. That's where we got the name. He's wanted there because he's on a list that the Syrians put out because he escaped.
So tell us about that. So how, when he escaped, sort of how did he knew that he was wanted?
Well, he's on that, you know how Michelle was saying he had to sign in every
Mhm.
morning? All the Jews that lived in Aleppo, before going to work, at that point, would have to sign in with the police to prove that it's like they hadn't left, they were watching them. So his name is on a list.
And so
I
how
don't
did
even,
how did he know when he went to Lebanon, how did he know that he was sort of a wanted man, as opposed to, just sort of an anonymous sort of persona that they were willing to just
his
let go?
sister, I think he kept in touch with his sister for a while, who kept telling him, they used to question her all the time. They were always coming over looking for him.
Was she sort of subject to torture and arrest, or nothing like that?
We never really found out what happened. My dad tried to get in contact with her. They didn't have telephones, so there was no calling. There was no way to get a hold of her other than by mail. And sometimes they'd get the letter, sometimes it would come back. I'm sure they confiscated it if we did send something. You couldn't get a hold of her after a while. And I don't remember how my dad found out, through somebody he knew who wasn't Jewish, who lived in Aleppo, that contacted him and said she passed away.
She was
Why
older.
wouldn't your
He was the oldest.
Yeah.
your aunt was the oldest? So why would she not want? I mean, I'm sitting here, I can't figure out why anybody would want to stay. I mean, was she just sort of somebody who said, "This is where I am. I'm going to die here. I don't have kids. What difference does it make?" Or what was going through her mind, as far as you know?
I think she was probably scared. She was a lot older than him. Because
And how old are we talking here for context?
Okay, so for example, when my
Well,
dad
she's the
passed
first
away,
mother's,
he was
the first
101.
mother's kid, right?
Right. She's the oldest from the first mother.
Yeah, my
Michelle.
grandfather is from the second mother of his father.
This would be upset.
So at the
Okay,
time,
so
she
there's-
probably was in her
got it.
70s.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I didn't realize. Okay.
there's a huge age gap, right? If there's like 12 kids.
Right. No,
he-
I didn't realize
my
she was quite that
grandfather-
old.
Yeah, my grandfather was one of the youngest.
Yeah, my
And
dad
how old was your grandfather when he left?
When my dad was 52 when he came to Toronto.
Okay, and so he was 47 when he left Syria then.
No.
No.
He was 40 when he lived here.
40.
40.
Yeah.
Was he, I thought he was in Syria, in Lebanon for 5 years.
No,
How long was he in Beirut?
16 years.
16 years in Beirut.
Oh, sorry, you were in Lebanon. I'm sorry. So he was there a decade before you were born. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of it because
He got married like
my dad got married very late, and there was a 22-year difference between him and my mother,
Wow.
which was the common thing to do in Syria. It was an older gentleman that would marry a very young girl, usually around the age of between the age of 16 and 19. They got married.
Right.
Sometimes
Wow.
younger.
Yeah,
Yeah, because my grandmother's mom got married at 14.
she was 14.
Wow. And so, sort of, I forgot what the question I was asking, but your grandfather was in Lebanon for 16 years. What did he do there
Linens.
for work?
He opened up a store and he was selling linens like tablecloths. He sold ladies like hosiery, makeup, things like that.
Lingerie.
Lingerie.
And so
Hey,
what spurred him to leave? It was his brother in Canada who was sort of telling him that, come to North America, or was it sort of were things starting to turn in Lebanon?
No, things were still okay in Beirut. I think they kind of felt like things were going to change. That's why he left, because they were really happy living there. Like, life was great. I have a group that I was lucky enough to get together with in Israel last year of Lebanese Jews. We were a group of about 200 that came from all over the world and got together. And everybody lived a really happy life. I don't think anybody wanted to leave, but they felt it was happening, like something was going to happen. I think they felt it because slowly everybody started to go, and his friends had left, and his brother kept telling him, "You have to get out, because then I may not be able to get you out." So he left, and when the Civil War started, we were lucky enough to have a friend here. I don't know if you've heard Judy Feld-Carr. She helped a lot of Jews escape from Syria. She got my grandmother out of Beirut.
Wow.
And I think, from what I understand, there are 5 Jews left living in Beirut, and they
Yeah,
are
like
living
5 to 11, and they're there for business or something.
Yeah, and they live quietly. Nobody knows where they are. They stayed because of the money, I guess. They were taking care of the shul. They don't have enough
Like
for a
those
meal.
two, it's like the 2 Jews in Afghanistan who the 2 left and they didn't talk to each other, you know?
Right.
Wow. Wow, fascinating. Michelle, tell us a little bit about, because your mom mentioned that sort of that your father didn't, or your grandfather rather, really didn't open up a lot, or wasn't necessarily so forthcoming with, with sort of his upbringing. How did you get him to open up to tell this story? Was he traumatized by it? Why did he open up to you? Was he just never asked, or was there something that he didn't want to share?
No, he was asked, I'm sure. I remember growing up, I wasn't the first of, I have an older sister, and I do remember her when I was much younger. This is in USDS. She wrote a report on him escaping, because I remember hearing about it at the dinner table, right? And all they really told her was what I grew up knowing, which is this image of somebody like a ninja escaping all in black at night. Like, nobody really talked about it, and he just gave facts. If you asked him, he said what year he left, where he went from this point to this point, he paid someone, and then life was better. He didn't ever get into it. I think he was scared. So it's not that people didn't want to know, because he didn't even tell my mother.
He was always scared. He was always scared
Yeah.
that somebody was coming to get him.
Yeah, he thought people were listening on the phone. So, because even later, when he would talk to me over the phone, sometimes it was always a different answer when I was in person and I got the truth. Because I think he thought people were listening, honestly. He was even, when he was telling me he was scared, we actually, I don't know if this tape exists, but there might be a tape, because I may have actually been recording at the time. And even throughout the interview, of me kind of arguing with him that, no, you have to tell, like, you said you were going to sit down and tell me that you were in Syria and things were bad, but now you're telling me, you're sitting here in front of me, and I have this school project I'm doing, and you're telling me Syria was a dreamland. That doesn't make sense. Like, you gotta tell me. So it was a lot of back and forth before he would actually open up. The scene where he's singing, I actually had to leave the room, and I waited, and he wasn't going to do it. He wasn't going to sing the song he told me about that he was singing when he crossed the border. And I just told him, I said, well, I'm just going to leave the camera running, and I'm going to leave the room, and I'll come back when you tell me you're done. And I waited on the other side of the wall, because I wanted to hear if he was actually going to do it. And 2 or 3 minutes went by of nothing. And then all of a sudden I heard him start to sing. And then he called me back in. And I remember after he kind of did that scene, suddenly it was like he told me anything. It was really, the rest of the interview went very smoothly. He would tell me anything. But before this project, he never spoke about it. I think he was too scared. And maybe he thought that people didn't want to know, maybe he felt like people really didn't care, and you just have to get over it and move on. Like a lot of people think, right? It's one of those things. And I think he came from that mentality as well, where people didn't talk about it. It was something that happened, you get over it and you survive, and that's it.
Was your grandfather aware of the impact that his story via you as the messenger had?
Yeah, because I remember every few weeks I'd come back to their apartment and I'd be like, look, you're in the newspaper. And they were like, what? Like, I remember, like, he thought it was, I remember at the premiere, especially because I saw his face, because that was the big moment where all of our friends, family, all the shul members, was at Kihila, where they would see it. And I was a little nervous because he had already seen it beforehand and approved it, but nobody else had seen it yet. So I was nervous how he would react with everybody in the room. And I looked at the end, I looked over, he was beaming. He had the biggest smile. I've never seen him like that before. Biggest smile on his face. Everybody was asking him more questions. And he was just, after that, you can ask my friends who stopped by to see him sometimes, because he had a little fan club, and he would just start telling you about his life, even if you didn't ask. It was, he saw the difference even within himself. But I know some family members in New York called him one time because they were looking for his phone number, and they were Googling, Joseph and Olga Esses, and the movie came up, and they're like, why are you in a movie? What did you do? And I think, it was nice to see how it changed him. And it definitely, I think, made him a lot calmer and a lot more at peace with himself. And then he gave a lot more interviews. He did with B'nai B'rith, Sija, the National Post, and my grandmother as well. So it definitely a very big shift in mentality.
Wow. Gracie, how much was sort of this story present in your childhood? Was it sort of almost like a Holocaust survivor where you knew that's who he was and that was sort of it? He didn't talk about it, like sort of how present was it in your upbringing?
He never talked about it. He never said anything. I do remember like little things. He would talk about Beirut more, but his being in jail and that, he never really wanted to talk about it. And I just remember once when I was younger, waking up with my mother screaming. He was dreaming that he said that the guards were after him, or they were hitting him or something, and he was hitting back, only he hit my mother in her sleep and scared her. But he would have nightmares, and he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to talk. It was amazing that Michelle got him to speak, because he really didn't say too much. I got involved a little bit in when I was in USDS. They put me at USDS when we came here, and I used to go from school to school discussing what it was like in Beirut. And you know what, it's funny, you hear a lot about everybody else, but you never hear about the Jewish, the refugees from like Arab lands.
My grandmother was really forthcoming though, because when my dad was there, he was holding the camera, and I'm sure he remembers when I sat down to ask her, because remember, this is a movie about him, and I'm asking her questions about, meeting him, and she started telling me her life story. And that's how I found out her mother, was married at 14, and she gave me her whole family history, no problem. So she was actually very forthcoming with information, but I do think it was because it was a very different situation. She left when she was really young, like a little kid, and she did not go through, the same thing. Remember, 20-year age difference. He was in jail. He was beaten. He remembers having his livelihood taken from him. So I think it was probably a little bit more, for her, it was almost like repeating a history book. And for him, it was more personal.
Was there, as far as you know, an impact or a positive consequence on other people telling their story as a result of, your film and the story that you told? Sort of other people coming out of the woodwork a little bit?
Well, there's a lot of people after. I got a lot of mixed response when I did it originally, and to this day sometimes I get a lot of positive messages and people who want to share their story and ask me, how, and a lot of them are Arab Jews, Jews from Arab lands, and they want to know how to learn about their own history. I've also gotten a lot of people messaging me telling me that it's not true and that the Jews were mean to the Arabs and I'm a liar and other not nice messages. But I think it just comes with the territory. You're always going to get good and bad. But if you get bad, it means you're doing something right. Because I got a lot of mean messages I look at the profiles before I block them. And there are a lot of them. There was one from Syria, one I think from Egypt. I can't remember. But to just think that your film made it all the way to Syria or Egypt and somebody took the time to message you and tell you you are wrong. I must be doing something right.
Your parents are getting nachas right now, I can see.
I know, it's because it's a big deal. If somebody messages you from Syria, they found a small document from a girl in high school, like, and they are like, no, we have to message her and let her know she's a horrible person. I read that, I felt so good. I felt really good. So it's okay.
Well, I mean, certainly you should be proud. This is a fascinating story. I mean, obviously, I'm sure everyone here, those of us who, were not able to sort of meet your grandfather or
Yeah.
hear him. I mean, this is, obviously a tremendous opportunity to learn more, not just about him, but as a gateway really to the entire Syrian Jewish community, of which, like you said, is basically non-existent now.
Well, a year ago,
it's sort of
a year ago, December 4th is when he passed away.
Oh, wow.
He's 101.
Wow. Well, certainly I hope that the impact of your film and your storytelling, brings an aliyah to his neshama. Tell us, those of you who are watching and who will watch the recording, how can we go about finding your film online?
So I have a link for that. Let me grab it for you. It's harder to grab it when I'm on my phone. So if the screen freezes, I'm still here and I can hear you, and I'm sorry, but this is the technical glitch and this is how it goes. And maybe I can just post it to the group. So you can keep talking. I'm still here.
Wonderful. Well, I was going to say, I was sort of going to use that as an opportunity to, to wrap up and obviously, make sure that we can share this recording with those who, I haven't seen it yet. Excuse me, I know you've, I know of the film and I've seen you talk about it. I definitely want to see it now because this has certainly only piqued my interest. I see a lot of parallels in terms of the story of Holocaust survivors. Obviously not exactly the same scenario, but, we have people who had to leave everything behind, the people who didn't leave, maybe they were rounded up and camped, but they're gone. They left all their money, their entire thousands of year history was gone, and it's and it's tragic. Unlike Germany, Syria is still a big black box to us. We can't go there. We can't access it. It's not like Germany where you can go and you can see the sites. You can't do that in Syria, and it must. It's.
That's the hardest, I think, for me. Because I've always, especially after doing this, I wanted to go. I know my grandfather never wanted to go back, but I would love to go. I would love to see it. So it's hard because I know I can't.
Well, perhaps one day. Have you come across the video yet? Have you been able to find the link?
Yeah, so I did it post. I sent it to the group chat of this. Do you see it?
Oh yeah, sorry. So everybody who's there, perfect. If you want to be able to watch the perfect, there it is.
What I'll do is I can also send it to you and you can post it. But I also posted my email address if anybody has any questions, they want to get in touch, or they want to see more clips and articles and stuff about it. It's michelle.dev.kahn@gmail.com. And if you Google, even though I sent the link, if you Google Culture Unplugged, because that's the name of the web festival that it was a part of, and then add to that Wanted, the Joseph Esses, ESSES story, you'll find it there as well on Google.
Incredible. Well, first of all, thank you again for to Gracie and Michelle for joining us. I mean, this is really a fascinating story, and only the peak of what you could certainly share with us. So I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say we're very appreciative to obviously to your late grandfather for sharing the story, and to you for memorializing it. And of course, I'm sure we all look forward to watching, for those of us who haven't, to watching the documentary and learning more. So thank you very much to you both for joining us, and thank you everyone as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.